the lesson that's assigned to me is He is the one true God. It's actually an original lesson done by Roger Campbell, and I, it's a very simple lesson, and I believe that for those of us who are Christians, it would not come as a there wouldn't be anything that's surprising in it. So anyway, you know, who those who open the Bible would not go very far before you encounter the concept of God. So in the Bible, in as soon as you open up the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, we have the words in the beginning, God. All right. The fourth word in the Bible is God. All right. In fact, in chapter 1, the word God appears at least 30 times. So it becomes quite obvious that God is the center of the Bible's message. You think about what he can do. Simply by speaking, he brought the universe into existence out of nothing. He is truly awesome, isn't it? But then, throughout the world, there are great multitudes of people who worship a multiplicity of God. A practice that we commonly call polytheism. Like for instance, most of you know that Carol and I just came back from India, where 90% or 90% of the people practice Hinduism, and we were told that there is like 32,000 different gods. There's a god in the tree, there's a god in the land, there's a god in the river, there's gods everywhere, and then so so they pray to whatever gods. I suppose even in the Chinese culture there is God for everything. Even the house, within the house you have a Deiji Gong, which is a god that looks after your land. Uh, so that's why I suppose with them they built their temples underneath a tree because they think that there is a god that lives in the tree. Uh, but in contrast, the Bible declares that there is only one God, one true God, and He alone is the Lord of heaven and earth. And we refer to Him as Jehovah, or the God of the Bible. Simply mean He is the God who is revealed and described in the Bible message. The one thing I need to make clear is that the Bible is not God, and God is not the Bible. Rather, the Bible is God's revelation to mankind. It is the tool by which He reveals Himself and communicates His views to humans. So then the question people will ask is, why should anyone conclude that the God of the Bible is the one true God? What type of proof is available to verify this? Um, and our response to this question is to point to the reliability and trustworthiness of the Bible message. The Bible affirms that there is but one true God, and we accept everything that the Bible teaches about Him. Our acceptance is not based on emotions, it's not based on our personal preference, it's not based on our family tradition or the Bible's popularity in some circles. Instead, we acknowledge and defend the truthfulness of the Bible's instruction because there is evidence. There is evidence available, archaeological evidence. The Bible's message is in harmony with historical facts. It is even in harmony with science as well, and it includes numerous cases of fulfilled prophecy. These and other proofs cause us to conclude that yes, the Bible must be a work that comes not from human, but it comes from God, the Creator. The Bible is His inspired message. 2 Timothy 3 verse 16. So, based on that, right, let's analyze tonight our topic and consider the implications for our lives and the welfare and the welfare of all humanity. So the first point I want to put tonight is He is. God is. In other words, God exists. He was, He is, and He will always be. Prophet Daniel declared to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, he said, "But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets." When he was asked to explain his Nebuchadnezzar's dream, yes, indeed, he exists, and in him we live and move and have our being. Acts chapter 17, verse 28. Those who desire to please God, according to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 16, says, "But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God, what must he do? He must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." So atheists, scoffers, they will ask us this question. They will say, did God create man, or did man create God by using his imagination? First thing is, God is real. God's existence is real. Humans have got nothing to do with God's existence. But God has everything to do with the starting of the human race and other forms of life. All we have to do is just observe the universe in which we live. Just look around. It certainly did not just happen. You know. It all points towards a designer, the great God who is revealed in the Bible. In fact, in in uh, in Psalm chapter 19, verse 1, the psalmist says, "The heaven declares the glory of God, and the firmament show his handiworks." Heaven did not come about by accident. They were formed by God, by the Creator. You know, God did all this, so He is. When God gave the instructions to Moses about returning to Egypt, He described Himself as I am. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. Jehovah God is the self-existent, eternally existent being who was made. Uh, some people might ask, who made God? No one. He always existed. You know, Sometimes if I could place a mark on a line that represents certain events and say this is when God exists, but you know what? You can't do that because God was there in the beginning. All right. There is no limitations to God. He is self-existent eternally. Uh, ex- he was, he is, and he is to come. Revelation chapter 4, verse 8. So he is. When it comes to the God of the Bible, he is. The second point I want to make is that he is the true God. He is true, meaning he is genuine, authentic. He is not fake. He's not a fake. He is not a myth. He's not a made up being. you know. But on the other hand, the Bible does talk about other gods that are not true, that are made up. They are counterfeits, false gods that cannot even be compared anywhere near to the God of heaven. When King Hezekiah spoke of the mighty Assyrian forces, he related how they cast the deities of those whom they conquered into the fire to be burned. In 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 18, he said about them, and they have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of man's hand, wood and stone. Therefore, they destroyed them. Now, these are no gods. These are man-made gods, not at the same level as our God of heaven and earth. You know, those are fake gods, but our God is real. He is genuine. Again, Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 10. Jeremiah wrote that the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and an everlasting God. Notice the three things that he said. He is the true God, right? And then number two, he said he is the living God. And number three, he said he's the everlasting God that reigns. You know, at his wrath, the earth will tremble and the nations will not be able to endure his indignation. Praise God that some who formerly served false gods have been converted to the truth that our Creator is the living and true God. Surely you and I personally know someone who needs to learn the truth that the God of the Bible is the true God. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 9, the apostle Paul tells us this. He says, "For they themselves declare concerning us what manner of entry we had to you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God." That's what we need to do. We need to go out and convey that message to other people so that we can turn them from serving idols. That's what they are. All the other gods are just idols. We have to turn them from all these idols to serving the one living and true God. The next point I want to make about God is He is unique. He is the one and only true God. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 6 tells us that there is one God. And which God is that? And what makes us think that our God is better than other people's God? We just spoke earlier that our God, the God of the Bible, is the true God. And now all we have to do is just simply expand to it. Jehovah declared about himself, "I am," he says. "I am the last, and beside me there is no God." Isaiah chapter 44, verse 6. Moses reminded the children of Israel that the Lord, He is God. There is none else beside Him. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35. And one of the clearest contrasts that we can see between idols and our one true God is set forth in Jeremiah chapter 10, from verse 3 to verse 10. In verse 3, he talks about the customs of the people are futile. For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. So we have the gods of other people, the idols and all that. They are made by hands, you know, whereas our God is the maker of all things. And then He said they decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it would not topple. That's what happens to false gods, fake god, the idols that the people worship. They need to fasten it with nails and hammer so that otherwise they just topple over. Whereas our God is awesome by itself. They make they and then in verse 5 they say they are upright like a palm tree and they do not speak. So their gods do not speak, whereas our God speaks to us through the word. And what else about the other gods? They must be carried around. They cannot go by themselves. Do not be afraid of them, he says, for they cannot do evil, nor can they do any good. So so the difference between our God and their God is this: their God cannot do anything. Our God does great things. Their God cannot do good. Our God can cause rain, lightning, wind. They, and what about their God? He said we should not fear them. Verse 5 says, we should not be afraid of them, whereas our God deserves to be feared. Eh, Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? For this is your rightful due. For among all the wise men of the nation, as in all their kingdoms, there is none like you. That is our God. And what about the other gods? It says, but they are altogether dull-hearted and foolish. A wooden idol is a worthless doctrine. Silver is beaten into plates. It is brought from Tarsus, and gold from Upharsis. The work of the craftsman, and of the hands of the metalsmith. Blue and purple are their clothing. They are all the work of skillful men. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. That's what our God is. That's how we can't compare other gods with our God. If a person have an accurate concept of God, he will understand that there must only be one true God, because a true God is complete and unlimited in every aspect of his being. To be anything less would remove him from being in the category of true God. Now, if God was not self-existent, thus could not exist without the existence of other God, he would not be the true God. In the same way, if this so-called God needed other gods to make him complete, then he wouldn't be a God either, right? That's the reason why the creator of our world, our Jehovah God, is the only genuine God, and no person should fear what non-real gods can do to them. Man-made gods have no power to influence humans. To be afraid of them or any so-called spirit is mere superstitions. So I want to encourage everyone tonight to put your trust in the living God. Remove from your heart for all your anxiety and fears that you possess in your former false belief. Our God, He is unique. He is the one and only true God. And something else about our God, He is a jealous God. He is a jealous God. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, which is part of the Ten Commandments, right? He says, I, the Lord, am God, am a jealous God. He says, "You shall not bow down to other gods or to serve them, because He is a jealous God." Exodus chapter 34, verse 14 is again, "For you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God." What does it mean to be jealous here? To be jealous here, the definition here includes those, uh, it requires exclusive loyalty, intolerance of disloyalty or infidelity. Just as a husband expects and demands complete devotion and fidelity from his wife, and vice versa, right? So God expects and demands such of all mankind. He created us, so He deserves our adoration and homage. He made us, so He alone is to be worshipped and revered. His nature cannot tolerate worship and service to others. This is His jealousy. The term jealousy implies divine love which cannot be despised, and Jehovah's weak refusal to be supplanted in affection by another. Um, so we read in the Old Testament, whenever His people serve other gods, God would punish them. But at the same time, that God would punish these people who serve other gods, God would help His people who are faithful to Him to conquer their enemies. So, in like manner, today, God demands our affection and faithfulness to Him. So He deserves our faithful service and devotion. We learn that. So what do we do then? Uh, Psalm chapter 95, verse 6. The psalmist says, "Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our God." He deserves our faithful devotion, our daily commitment to serve Him. In fact, in Matthew chapter 4, verse 10, Jesus said when He was being tempted, He said, "You shall worship the Lord your God, and Him only you shall serve." In Mark chapter 12, verse 30, and when He was asked the question, Jesus said, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength." So our love for God ought to be supreme. You know, if we truly appreciate the fact that the God of the Bible is our creator and that He is the only one who possesses the divine nature, then I ought to be willing to make whatever sacrifices are necessary in order to please Him. That's what we need to do. Our love for God ought to be supreme, with our highest affection being reserved for Him. Because He wants our whole life to be with Him. Anything less would be unacceptable to Him and would cause those who are lacking such devotion to Him to be recipients of His wrath if they don't change their way. So, in conclusion for this evening, we've gone through a few points this evening. Number one, He is. He is the true God. And this God is unique. He is the one and only true God. And we learn that He is a jealous God. And He deserves our faithful service and devotion. It is not enough for you and me to just simply nod our heads and acknowledge the truth that the God of the Bible is the only living and true God. Yes, that's what he is. And now, and having knowing that, what do we do? He wants us to commit to him. He wants and deserve our greatest commitment. Question is he getting it? Is it also not enough for us to be devoted to the God of heaven in our own lives? He wants us to go forth, tell others about him and his plan to save the soul, just as Paul stood in the ancient Athens and proclaimed the unknown God to lost people. So you and I must be prepared and willing to do the same. Revelations verse 4 verse 11. That John records this: "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power." Why? Because for you created all things. By your will they exist and were created. I want to thank you again for joining this lesson, joining us this evening. I hope that that is enough to convince us that our God is the one true God and He is the only God.